question and the answer is not very far. The song of the sages, the knowledge of the ages is living where you reside. You have the key that unlocks the door to enter in that sacred place you haven't gone before, where deep meets deep, soul to soul. Feel that connection as the truth unfolds. I am, I am, I am, I am, you are, and I am. You are the answer, yes, you are the key that unlocks the door to freedom and leads you to me. Look deep inside you, trust the force that guides you, it knows the way. There's no separation, we're one and the same, a child of the Creator, known by different names. The Alpha and Omega, the eternal flame that burns deep inside you. Do you know my name? I am, from the mountains to the oceans. I am, from the rocks to the trees. I am, all the stars and constellations. I am, you are. I am, from the mountains to the oceans. I am, from the rocks to the trees. I am, all the stars and constellations. I am, you are, yeah. I'm spiritual and mystical. I am light, I am love. I live in you and you live in me. From the very low to the heavens above, I am. Come on, put your hands together. There's no separation. We're one and the same. A child of the Creator, known by different names. The Alpha and Omega, the eternal flame. It burns deep inside you. Do you know my name? I am, from the mountains to the oceans. I am, from the rocks to the trees. I am, all the stars and constellations. I am, you are. I am, the peace that passes all understanding. I am, the joy that's overflowing. I am, the love and abundance. I am, you are. I Good morning again. You know, it's not easy to come back and start talking after something like that rushes through you. If you'd like to, you can take a breath with me. So I'm just so grateful and thankful to be back here. It's my second time in 1 year. You had me earlier here. And Just so grateful for Reverend Georgia Prescott giving me an opportunity to speak my truth, sing my truth again in her absence. But we're here. You know, I have to say this before I start talking. The community, but the entire city of Sacramento is very interesting to me. Really interesting. It reminds me of the South. And that's a good thing. Yeah? Growing up in the South, you could see somebody almost a mile away and you just start waving, "Hey, how you doing?" That's the way it is here. The acknowledgement of another human. But not just that, there is an energetic about us. So when we see somebody else, it just makes us happy to see them. You know, the first time that I came here to CSA, it was like that for me. I was not a stranger, even though you probably never ever, some of you may have never heard of me or heard me sing before. It felt like I was just right at home. You see what I'm saying? That's always a good thing. So you don't, you just walk right in. And growing up in the South, people were very honest. Some people say, mm-hmm. For the majority of the part, I grew up in a community where we were taught, if you didn't have anything good to say, don't say anything at all. If you didn't like somebody, just, bid them good and farewell and move on about your business. That's the way I feel about y'all. I don't know why you're laughing. If you like somebody, "Hey, how you doing?" If you don't, you'll bless them and go on about your business. That's a good thing. Now, you do know I live in Los Angeles, right? So that's the reason why I'm saying it's a good thing, because that doesn't happen a whole lot in Los Angeles if you've ever been there. Growing up in the South was very interesting for me, a very integral part of my life. Spent I graduated college at 17 years old and then went to graduated school in the South as well. So I was there till I was about 25, 26 years old until I moved to New York City. But the South gave me foundation. We were taught to respect the elders. We were taught to be kind as best as we could, kids growing up being kind to one another. We were taught to believe in something that was greater than what we could see with our eyes. Whatever it was called, and wherever we went on Sundays, we were taught that something else was making this thing work. There was something governing everything that many of us call God. I'm grateful for that. And in the household, there was order. Yeah? So when I got out into the world, the real world as they called it, I had these platforms to stand on. Did I do things that were on the outer circle of that? Surely I did. But at least I had a place inside of me that I could go back to. And I'm really grateful for that. I'm the third child, the youngest, the baby, as my mother would say. My brother is 15 years older than I am. My sister is 11 years older than I am. And on my father's side of the family, I'm the youngest grandchild by over a decade. So you know what that meant, don't you? And I knew how to work it. I did. I got everything I wanted just by smiling. Please. I learned to acquiesce to everybody's dreams as well, what they wanted out of my life. My mother wanted me to be an executive, something like a doctor or a lawyer or a CEO. I was a high school All-American football player, so my uncles thought that one day, for sure, we're going to see you on the tube on Sundays playing, and straight A student in school. So I lived my life trying to get the approval of so many other people in my family and in the community, because it was like an extended community that I lived in. But there was one person who I could not corral. Everything that I did, every single thing that I said, I tried to get the approval, but I never could seem to get it. And that was my daddy. My father was born in 1925. Old school. My father was also born and raised in the South. He was very dark. Grew up through the Great Depression. Came through that time where, if you remember the signs of sanitation workers, when they had the sanitation strike in Memphis, Tennessee, they were holding up the signs, "I am a man." Was in World War II. But you don't think about all of those things. You don't consider those things when you're 3 and 4 years old and you're tugging at your father's leg. "Daddy, come out and play with me. Play ball with me. Give me a hug." My father had order, but my father was also emotionally vacant. So none of those things really existed between the two of us. And I was fully self-expressed and tactile. He was the opposite. And I loved the ground that he walked on. My grandmother was a self-taught pianist, and I would stay with Granny until my brother and sister came home from school or my parents came home from work. And my grandmother used to teach me hymns and spirituals. I didn't like it, but she used to teach me anyway. At the age of 3 and 4 years old, the last thing you want to do is sit at your grandmother's knee and have her try and pretend that she was tapping out these knees on her knees, these notes on her knees. Raspy, out of tone, just alto voice. She'd sing and I'd just be closing my eyes trying to find out, what is that word you're saying? And she would just be, "Repeat after me," I said, "repeat after me." But after a while, my grandmother, through these songs, "Great is thy faithfulness, O God, my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee." And she'd begin to cry. And I didn't know what was wrong with Granny. So I tapped my grandmother on the knee. Granny, you okay? Come back, Granny." My grandmother didn't have a lot of words to say often. Body language was big. Look at me, nod her head. "Yeah, Granny's just fine." And so here's a child that has a strong musicology, but had everybody around him with this world of possibilities. And he's just wanting one thing, and that's for his daddy to say, "I love you." It took a while for me to start growing cold of my father. I guess at the age of 8 was when, on Sundays we would have dinner. Everybody would have a place at the table. And I remember maybe around the 3rd or 4th grade, I would try to eat my food as quickly as I could so that I wouldn't have to sit at the table with him. I could just somehow get away from that. And I believe in hindsight, the way that I dealt with it was get more accomplishments. Do more things that get you accolades. For something to give you clarity on the value of who you are. The validation. And that's exactly what I did. But I tell you, I longed every moment, every success, I longed to hear my father say, "Son, I'm proud of you." By the time I was 15 years old, I was a sought-after football player and was on my way to a football scholarship in a school. And I'd gotten to the place where I said, "You know what, I don't have any confidence in our relationship, so I'm not going to ask Daddy what he thinks of where I should go to school next." And, you're just trying to make decisions and trying to do things, trying to get to the place where you're trying to grow up so fast, but you want somebody to be there. "Son, did you consider this? How about that? And as I went to school, the resentment had become so strong that there were hints of hatred toward my father. Moved out of the house. You know, after I graduated from college, I got a job with IBM. Not my dream, that was my mother's dream. Went to work for IBM, and I thought, maybe this is it. I've moved out of the house. We're not around each other anymore. I'll try it one more time. So I went home, and I said, Daddy, guess what? I got a job with IBM. He says. I was dejected, and I was living in Memphis at the time, driving from Nashville back to Memphis, and I passed a billboard, and it said, Jesus cares for you. And I slowed down really slowly, and I said, I don't care if Jesus cares for me. I want my daddy to care for me. It was at this time that I knew that I could never get away from that yearn for the love of my father, because I surely did love him as much as I was trying not to. I left IBM. I started working for another company, and a year later, from the date that I started, they fired me. And so I decided, at the advice of a friend, he's now a mentor, to pack my bags and move to New York to be on Broadway. Now, you know I had to go through my mother before I moved anywhere. It's the last person that you have to consult with. And my mother's funny. She's the light of my life. So I called my mother, and my mother knows when her children call, especially me, with a curveball. So I say, Mom, guess what? I said, I'm moving to New York. She says, let me ask you a couple of questions, son, because I don't understand. She said, you had a great job with IBM. You left IBM, went to another company. They fired you, and now you're telling me you want to move to New York? You've never lived out of the South? New York's a zoo. It's crazy. You don't know anybody there, and you want to be on Broadway? When did you ever take an acting, dance, singing lesson in your life? I said, well, Mom, I feel like I'm being led there, something I can't explain inside of me. She said, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to go to the yellow pages, go all the way back where they have the business section, and thumb all the way to the letter P. I said, yes, ma'am. Just thumb all the way down till you get to the word psychiatrist. And I want you to call the first listing. Doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman. You go in and tell them all your troubles, and when you come out, you'll be just fine, because you have lost your mind, son. I did again. Once again, I acquiesced. I said, okay, Mom, I will do that. There's just one thing. I've already purchased my ticket, and it's one way. I had to go to New York. I had to go to New York to find out, even in the midst of what my father and I did not have, I had to find out who Charles really was. Amongst all of the love that I had been getting from my grandmother and my mother and from other people, I had to find out. So I moved to New York. First show, Jesus Christ Superstar. How about that? I get cast in Jesus Christ Superstar with the original Jesus and original Judas, if you saw the 1972 motion picture, Ted Neely and Carl Anderson. We go on the road for 6 months. I play the role of Simon. I understudy Carl Anderson as Judas. And on the trail, we just finished a show in Casper, Wyoming. So we're going from Casper, Wyoming, all the way to the West Coast to Long Beach, California. So I've had a couple of hours of sleep after the show, and I decide I'm going to get up and start talking to the driver, see if he has anything to say. And we start talking, and all of a sudden, one of my dreams came true. Big tumbleweed passes swiftly by the bus. And I said, wow, that's a tumbleweed. I didn't know they existed. I've only seen them in the Westerns. We started talking again, and what seems to be a tumbleweed coming right for the bus lands right in my right periphery. I turn, and it fades. I said, wow, that's interesting. Continue my conversation with the driver, and here is this thing again. I turn. This time, it doesn't move. It's an apparition. It's the face of my father. I immediately began thinking, I thought I left you when I moved to New York. I thought when I stepped on 87th and Columbus Avenue in New York City, I was free and I was home and I was as far away from you as I had ever been in my life. I remember after the tour ended, I was sitting on my bed in Harlem a couple of months after that happened, and I heard a voice say, call him. Picked up the phone, called, my mother answered. Very seldom if I'd ever bypassed my mother, talking to my mother to speak directly to someone else. And I said, Mom, is Daddy there? I need to speak with him. She said, is everything okay? I said, yes, ma'am, everything is fine. I just need to talk to him. He answered the phone. True to form. Hello. In that moment, all of the courage that I had gathered up to call him was just sucked out by that first and only word, hello. You see, my daddy was a giant to me when I was growing up. I wanted to be just like him. And over time, the love turned into fear. So I didn't know exactly where to put it, but I knew I had to call him. So I, in fear in that moment, after all of the courage had left, started going up and down this laundry list of things that I had remembered my father doing to me and saying to me. And at the end of the tirade, my father quietly and assuredly says, oh, that wasn't me. You're talking about somebody else. You got the stories mixed up. I became angered. Started going up and down the next laundry list, and I heard the voice, that one that had summoned me to call him, say, tell him. I said, Daddy, I forgive you. Nothing. Fear and now anger have struck me again. And I started making up things, just minute things. But then I hear the voice one more time. Tell him. And I said, Daddy, I love you. I always have, and I always will. Silence. Got off the phone and cried the entire night. But I made a covenant with myself. I said, you know what? From this day forward, I'm going to always tell him just exactly what I feel about him, how I've always thought about him, even if he never responds or has anything else to say to me. This is 1996-97. Years go by and I've kept my covenant. I've gone from Jesus Christ Superstar to Smokey Joe's Cafe to the Rocky Horror Picture Show to Lion King. And I remember being in the cast of Lion King and coming back from a day, one day that we had off to be with my parents. And of course, I had said at the end of the visit, Mom, I love you. I'll call you when I get to New York. Daddy, I love you too. See, it was just flowing off my tongue now because I'd gotten used to it. And of course, there was no response. But I had made the covenant that I would say it without an expectation, that if it was for real to me, then it would finally find its way in the earth, and the earth would know, if nothing else, my heart. I remember shortly after that, I was lying on the stage at the Lion King, getting ready for a show. And the question came to me. Perhaps the answer was nudging the question to get me to ask it. And I said, why am I here? What did I really come down here for? And all of that, all of that stuff came rushing back to me. Do you remember what steps happened before you got here? I'm talking about the good, the bad, and the awful. I still even in a sober mind, couldn't put it all together then, but I knew I was here for something much greater than the Lion King. The Lion King was just something for me to jump into. But I also realized that all of that which had happened to me before that, with my family, with my mother, my father, yes, and with all of that pain and disappointment, had somehow set me up for me to ask that question. What am I really here for? I soon left Lion King. I moved to Los Angeles. I was done with church at this time, by the way. Lion King had become my sanctuary on Sundays. And lo and behold, the first question that my roommate asked me when I landed in Los Angeles was what? Want to go to church? I said, no, man, I don't do church anymore. He said, no, this place is not like church. I said, mm-hmm. He said, no, it's called Agape. I said, oh, Carl Anderson used to try to get me to go to Agape. Never made it in form. Carl transitioned in February of 2004. I moved to Los Angeles and landed there September 2004. I said, okay, I'll go. I'll be late, but I'll go. We were there, we walked in, and this man, about this tall, dreads, on stage. I found a spot right back there. I was headed there, and in the middle of my stride, Dr. Michael Beckwith says, if you're conscious and aware or not, that right where you sit or stand is exactly where you're supposed to be. I'm here to tell you that you're in your perfect place. Ricky helped them feel it. Ricky Byers Beckwith hit a chord on the piano, and my life rushed all the way back to that sooty linoleum floor with my grandmother as she was tapping out these notes and chords on her knees. And my life from there rushed through me like a vortex of energy and said, wow, all of that which has happened has set this up. I am once again at home, but this time it was different. I had taken everybody with me, even my dad. In 2005, my mother called and she said, well, there's trouble in the house. I said, well, Mom, what's the problem? She said, your dad has been diagnosed with end-stage renal disease. The doctor has said that if he does not go on dialysis, then he will not be here for Christmas, which is in 6 months. And he has opted not to go on dialysis. Will you talk to him? I said, yes, ma'am, I will. And my father picks up the phone. Hello. I said, hey, Daddy. Well, they tell me that you've been diagnosed. You've gotten this diagnosis and that the prescription is for you to go on dialysis and you've opted not to go. He said, yes, that's right. I said, okay. I said, well, you know, it's your life and you have the choice to make. And I honor your choice. But we'd love to have you stay around a little while longer if you choose to. He said, all right. 10:30 that night, my mother called me. She says, what did you say to him? I said, well, I told him it's his life and it's his choice to stay. And we'd love for him to stay, but if he chooses not to, then we love him. And we've always loved him and always will. She said, well, he just decided he's going to stay. It was in this moment that everything around me was just shifting and changing. Shifting and changing. And I remember going home after that episode. A few years later, my father was well into his dialysis routine, 3 days a week. And he had just come from one session. He was sitting at the table. My mother was preparing breakfast for him. And I walked into the room. And he looks up at me and he says, oh, there's my baby. Daddy loves you. And I was just stuck. There were two sides working. There was one that was still angry. And in that moment, just so hurt. Where were you when I was tugging at your pant leg, begging you to hug me and play with me? Where were you when I just needed somebody to tell me, I'm okay? I'm fine. You're doing good, son. I'm proud of you. Where were you then? But then the other side asked, didn't you make a covenant? Long time ago, you decided that whether or not he ever said it, you were going to fulfill the dream and the truth inside of you. Did you not? I said, yes, I did. He's ready now. Are you ready? Charles, are you ready? Still stuck. But I had to honor the truth that was inside of me. And I had to look through my father's eyes right in that moment and see the possibilities that they all had for me. Way back when I could not have the possibilities for myself, he had them for me too. And I said, yes, I'm ready. 2 years later, November 2012, I saw my father have a meltdown. He cried for the first time, I think, in his life. Boo-hooed. And I sat there with him and I asked Spirit, I said, what am I to do? I'm afraid. I'm like a little child. I want to run out the room. He said, no, stand. Stand and be his strength like he's been yours. You see, in that moment, I realized that I never could have made it in New York if it had not have been for my dad. Never. Because what my father's tough love did for me was say, okay, I've got to find it for myself. It was my invitation into self-awareness, self-discovery. But he couldn't say it like I wanted him to because it never come to him like that. And all of my expectations were now under the aegis of something that was called, he's more than just a daddy and father. He's a man too. He had his own trials and tribulations. And in that time that I had before he made his transition, I got to hear it all. His relationship with his father. He had an older brother who was favored over him. My father was dark-skinned, y'all, living in the South. Talking about how he struggled to even come to the grip of knowing in his bones that he was a man. Whew. Really? And he said, and I did the best that I could. That meant for everybody. February 2nd, 2013, right after that episode in November of 2012 at Thanksgiving, my father transitioned. The last 5 days of his life, I was in the hospital room with him. From the time that I got up in the morning until they closed the hospital room down. And it was during that time when we communed spirit to spirit because he couldn't talk. And he said, now I'll have a chance to go with you everywhere. I'll fly all over the place with you. And I always want you to know that I loved you, even though I couldn't tell you because it was never told to me. But I want you to know I love you, son. I said those things to you because I saw the genius inside of you and I didn't want you to go astray. I know it landed hard on you, but that was my way of telling you. I was concerned about you and I saw the presence inside of you. Ooh, I was ready to just run out of the room and something said, no. Listen to what's being spoken under the tongue, because it always is something behind everything that you see, Charles. Everything that is spoken, everything that is said, those things that you may not understand shall come to light if you love them. If you just love them. A rock will tell you its secrets if it knows that it loves you. If you love it long enough, it shall be revealed. That's the beyond forgiveness. That's the blessing. And it's Thanksgiving. We're coming up on a beautiful, beautiful holiday. So what are we giving thanks for? I'm so grateful for my dad. I see him when I sing now. I hear him when I'm going through things that I don't know just how things are going to turn out. I hear him say, remember, I told you everything is going to turn out all right. You're just so hard-headed. But there's love inside of that. That's his love. And now I get to share it. Two things that my father used to always say. It's not what you get. It's what you take care of. And the other is, whatever you get, make good of it for yourself. Then give it away. Give it to somebody else who you think might benefit from it. And that's why I wrote the book, Between Me and Dad. It's not just a memoir about me and my dad. It's about the lessons. Because we all have a Charles and his daddy story. All of us do. Whether it's with a daddy or a mother or a sibling, a cousin, a boss, we all do. And it's just learning how to navigate. Reverend Ramona said in a spoken sentence this morning that love is calling or looking to be expressed. Something's calling for it, or it's looking to be expressed. That's all. I invite you today as we move into the Thanksgiving place of giving thanks for everything, that you find somebody in your mind, maybe yourself, that you say, I forgive you and I love you. It's not necessarily going to happen overnight, but that's the beauty of it, because you get to unlevel all of the rock, all of the concretization that's under that. But then when you do, you can say, whew, I'm free. And I know my Father's free. And I'm free too. And so are we. God bless you. Thank you so much.